Great. So welcome. We're going to talk today about how to get more returning and referring patients, specifically with your patient newsletter and what you should be doing with that. And we'll be getting into things that you can do in the clinic to help with that and facilitate better results. And if you're not doing a patient newsletter, talk about why that's really important for you to be doing that. So let's jump in here. As we get going along, please feel free to pop a question in the chat. I'd love to answer your questions as we go along here. This is very casual. We're just going to be having a good conversation as we go along here. Let's make my video a little bit bigger here. All right. So, and let me just make sure I got something turned off here. Okay, good. All right. So let's talk first about your patient acquisition strategy. All right, so this is our strategy here at Practice Promotions, what we help practices with to implement their marketing so that they can get much more new patients and returning patients and referred patients. So as we can see here on the left, we got the top part, which is all about building a massive online presence. And so you can get to more people in your community that are searching for you online. There's a lot to be done with that. And that's a great way of getting people first into that funnel. Next is building the trust with them through reviews and the way that your brand is online, way that your website performs, and that ties down into convert patients. So that's, are they going to get them to take action ideally through your website so that they're going to make that phone call or fill out a form or whatever it may be through that mechanism to start becoming a patient with you. But one area that's often missed is, or not worked on so heavily, is that bottom portion, right? Which is really, really critical. And that's how to leverage patient reactivations and referrals. And that's what we're going to dive into here today, what you can be doing to get more out of this particular part of this patient acquisition strategy. So why should you listen to us? Well, we do a lot of this for practices all over the US and Canada. We actually send out over 5 million direct mail newsletters and probably 3 times as much that in terms of emails and social posts of the newsletters. So I've had a lot of experience over the last almost 12 years of doing this. I also did this in our practice for over 6 years. So lots of years of running different newsletters, working with lots of clinics across the North America and realizing what works and what doesn't work, and bringing that to our clients. So we're bringing a lot of that information here and data of what's worked over the years to how you can make this correspondence to your patients even better. So here's a key thing. Why would you be focusing on your past patients, right? And so I've literally talked to over 1,000 practice owners over the years. And I can tell you the number one thing that they consistently don't do is enough marketing, enough effort to keep engaged with all the patients that they've seen before. The expectation is in our business that people are just going to come back if they're happy, right? And you do get a percentage of people that do that, but there's also a greater percentage of people that just don't take action. They kind of suffer on, or they might go off somewhere else, or they may never go back to PT, might go off to, injections or whatever, right? So there's a lot of lost business, right, that you should be capitalizing on if you put your effort here. So let's look at this graph here below and why it's so important. So if we look at just the normal trend of a business over the course of say 10 to 12 years, if you're good and your marketing's working for you and you're focused really heavily, maybe you're getting 10, 20 new patients every month that are brand new, right? So let's just say that's 80 new patients a month, right? 960 new patients a year. That's fantastic. So each year you can bring on 960 new patients, right, that have never worked with you before. And yes, you'll get some trickle of those people come back, right? But if we look at those new patients, right, as these darker teal blocks here of adding on each year, you can't scale the company, you can't scale your practice without building on the returning patients. So if you do it right and you are very good at what you do and you're good at marketing what you do and keep it engaged with your past patients, they should come back for care. They should send friends and family, right? And so that's a way that you can really build year over year your customer base, right? And that's how successful businesses do it. Just think of Starbucks. My gosh, they've got a great captive audience. You're going to go back, you're addicted to their product, and you'll be going in there, 5-7 times a week. They'll get someone else to try them and they'll start too. So they build that repeat customer base over and over and over again. And you need to do the same thing in your practice. That's why, the number one marketing mistake by practice owners is focusing most or all of their attention on getting new patients. That's where the attention goes. But what we really need to do is not only focus on new patients, but really focus a lot on returning patients and past patients. And here's why: customer lifetime value. If I work hard and I spend marketing money to get a new person to come in for me, let's say they come in for an average of 12 visits, three times a week, 4 weeks, whatever, $80 a visit, whatever it may be, the average value is going to be somewhere around like $1,000, right, for that patient to come in one time. Service, super happy, they leave, but let's say they never come back, right? That was a lot of effort to get someone in for $1,000, right? But what if that person comes back to you? Maybe it's a problem that flares up again in the future. Maybe it's a different problem. Or let's say they even refer someone. That patient, if you see him another 3 times, let's say over the next 4 years, that person that you got in the first time, instead of just being $1,000 value, turns into $3,000 value. So again, this is why it's so important to work on repeat customers, because it is much more cost effective to be focusing on not only new patients, but especially past patients coming back for care. So we see our top performing practices really get into this kind of demographic where when they're rocking and rolling, they're going to have over 50% of the people that are in their practice at any given time are past patients or referred patients. That is a position of power, right, to be in as a business. Ideally, what if you could then control more direct access patients, people that are finding you online, people that are coming through workshops, all those new patients there. This is going to give you a lot of power in your practice to be autonomous, right, and not dependent on just referrals. Now, we still have doctors and people we work with and networks there, but ideally, if that was 10% or less, you have a lot of control over your practice and the growth and where it wants to go. So when we're talking to past patients, what's really our marketing purpose with these folks? What are we trying to accomplish? And it's really just to stay top of mind. People are busy. 6 months, a year down the road, they're going to forget you, right? So it's the ability to stay top of mind, and you do that through high perceived value. You're giving them ideas and suggestions and keeping that level of expertise in their eyes on a consistent basis, right? And so our marketing goals with them are to really keep emotionally connected to those past patients. We want to increase sharing from patients, right? And we can do that through lots of different means, but the idea there is how can we keep that connection going? And we also want to get people to take the decision to return. We want them to do something about it, right? And I'm sure you've had similar experiences if you're, been in the clinic, had plenty of patients that came back for care and you asked them, hey, Mrs. Jones, how long have you been suffering with your knee pain again, right? And then she's like, oh, 6 months. And you're thinking, well, why didn't you come back in sooner? They try to handle it on their own. They don't necessarily want to come back to therapy, right? Money and time that it takes to do that. People take some prodding, right? And so we have to drive that decision to return to therapy. And also our goal is to really continue to maintain that level of expertise, authority with our past patients, getting them to see you as the consistent authority in helping them with their body. So how do you get maximum results when it especially comes down to your patient newsletter that you should be doing every single month? It's really to reach as many people as possible, right, with that marketing in as many different ways as possible, right? So we'll talk about that here in a minute, as often as possible. So a failure here can be not sending enough information. Maybe you're just sending out a quarterly newsletter, right? That's not as good as a monthly newsletter, as well as additional correspondence and tips and value to your list, right? And then with the right message. So what can you provide the right message, the maximum value to your customer list that's going to help them engage with you? So here's some great ways to stay connected with your past patient list. Email is definitely a great one here. It's hard to do if you're not getting good open rates, right? And people engaging with that. So you got to be providing good, relevant information. You got to have a good system to send that through. It's obviously very low cost, but we don't get the open rates compared to other mechanisms, right? And in today's world, what's really important is not just to focus on one thing, because think about it, we as people in today's world, we're engaging information through lots and lots of different channels. So email, your mailbox, social media, phone calls that are coming in, spam calls that are coming in, like all kinds of stuff that's coming at us all day long. Our attention is distributed. So if you just focus on sending an email newsletter, you're totally missing out on reaching people in many different ways. So the volume of people, but also the layers of interactions with those people is really critical. So you got to work on email. Direct mail is really important. It's more effective today than ever before. Social media is definitely a mechanism here to use to keep people engaged. Phone, calls, like how many people in the office are getting and doing proactive phone calls to past patients, and then inviting people back with events and workshops for tips and advice for them. So we're going to talk specifically here about your patient newsletter and 3 different ways that you can maximize your results sending out your newsletter. So when you're doing a patient newsletter, you first have to think about what is the audience here that I'm trying to hit, right? Your past patient audience, but there's different layers to that audience. What is the content that I want to put in there that's going to have the maximum effectiveness and getting people to be excited and stay connected with me and also take action? And then also the delivery. How am I going to get this newsletter out to my audience in a variety of different ways that's going to have maximum impact? So let's look at step 1 here, which is your audience. And it's targeting the right list. And there's different things you might be doing with your marketing, right? Especially to past patients, but you're going to have some different language that you might want to use, right? So past patients, we're going to have a certain language that we're going to talk to them, as well as current patients. The mechanism for current patients is we're trying to talk to them about keeping on therapy, right? Staying with therapy and how important it is to complete their therapy. So that way we can have people continue their whole plan of care. We've got physicians and networks. So marketing that we're doing out to physicians and networks should be different than what you're sending out to your patients, right? It's going to be a little bit more technical, a little bit more about them and how we can help them look great in their patients' eyes. And then also in today's world, hey, it's hard to find therapists, right? And we've got to work hard to attract top talent. So it has to be a continuous process. And what are we sending out to get therapists attracted to our practice? An example of this was, in our practice in South Florida, this was, when we sold our practice back in 2010, of course, it was still difficult at that time to hire therapists. We were in a very busy area in South Florida, only a couple of, schools that were relatively close that produced PTs and PTAs, and this huge demand, right? So there was always a difficulty hiring therapists in our area. So one thing that we did in addition to like ads on monster.com and stuff back then, was we would actually send our patient newsletter out to a list of therapists. And we would do our normal patient newsletter to the patients every month. But once a quarter, we would tack on and produce more newsletters that we would send to a list of, say, 1,000 therapists in a couple of counties around us. And we'd get some calls, but mostly it was there as a PR action, right? Just to keep in front of people. And then we would send out specific postcards along with job ads and stuff like that were specific to, we're recruiting for therapists, right? But people had this high perceived value of our practice in the PT community in that area. So what was cool was when we actually left, we did have one therapist that decided to transition out right as we were going to leave, exit our practice, right? So what was cool was actually in that week, we had 3 therapists come in saying, hey, I've seen your information around and I would, like to put my resume in. So that was a pretty cool position to be in. But I know that was because of all the actions we had been doing over time to build that PR. All All right, so step 2 is really about the content, and we'll get into that and what you should be putting in your newsletter on a monthly basis here. Again, it has to really represent the brand of your practice. If you want to be looked as professional, you don't want to send something out that's cheap, right? And you want to make sure that it looks and feels professional and people want to read it. So here's what your newsletter really needs to get people to connect with you and stay connected with you, right? Stories are huge, and it's about that personal connection. So wherever we can incorporate stories about the practice and especially results that you're getting with patients is key, right? So that's really important for that. Photos, again, like you should be having someone in the clinic who's in charge of constantly getting photos, right? And photos with patients, therapists with their arm around them or hands-on. Of course, you get signed consent, those kind of things, but the more photos of you have, the more arsenal you have for your marketing, right? And we see time and time again in our print department when clients are really good about getting us photos from the clinic and personal stories, their newsletters kick butt, right? And it's really, really awesome to see that. And we love it. We love personalizing their newsletters. Also in the newsletter, you want to give value, you want to educate. You got to have a balance between the stories that are going in there, but then also what's valuable to the person, like what could they take away, a certain way to improve their core stability, right? Or education on how to avoid, vertigo or whatever it may be. So you got to give value there. And then ultimately, the whole point of this is keeping them engaged, but also getting them to take action. Come on back in, let's have a look at you. Send a friend, so you got to call them to action in that newsletter. So here's an example here. This clinic does a great job of taking those photos, making things very personal. They have a success story, having that therapist with the patient there. They have a staff spotlight, so they're really getting to show what's going on with the staff. They do some key things with other businesses in the area that they help support them. So they kind of showing that participation in the community. And they have the workshops going on in here. And then key highlight here is not only tips of how to alleviate chronic pain, but also just something fun, right? Something that's also very usable, like a recipe, right? A healthy recipe or whatever may be in there, some exercise tips. So whatever you can do to make this really personable is what's going to count. And here's some examples of just how those kind of like personalizations can impact a clinic, right? So if they're sending out the right type of patient newsletter and they start doing that, here is returning patient phone calls. So again, with our call system, we can actually show what patients are actually returning. And we can see the transition here from, like the single digits all the way up to like 41 returning patient phone calls a month from that action. So very worthwhile action when you can have a significant increase in the volume of patients coming back in because your marketing is working. So the key thing here with stories, right, is we want to maintain that personal connection. So telling patient successes, therapist spotlights, new techniques that were obtained. Maybe you did a training, right? Or one of your therapists went to a training or got a certification. Is that promoted, right? You need to promote that. Events and celebrations, right? Any kind of community events or celebrations within the clinic. We celebrated 10 years, whatever it may be, that really needs to be promoted. And then of course, when you are getting photos and telling stories and getting patient success, make sure you just have written consent forms. And that's not a big deal. Most people are really, happy to share that. Photos, right? So photos, it's really key here to be able to tell those stories of all the big wins that you're having in the practice. Like you're transforming people's lives every single day. You need to be telling that, right? And so the newsletter is a great way to keep telling that to your past patients. And so you can speak through your photographs. And again, you want to really show the personality of the clinic, right? And show your therapists celebrating with patients. Also, here's some things when you are doing different types of images. One is obviously if you're doing one with a patient, that's great. If you're doing like a treatment staged photo, which is really great to have in all kinds of marketing materials and on social posts and things like that, just make sure that you show gentle hands-on shots, because we might get people into positions to do very subtle techniques, let's say like on a lumbar spine or something like that. But to someone who doesn't know about that, it can look aggressive. So just think about that when you are staging your photos, that you make it look subtle and calming and soothing, and it's a great place to go for hands-on care, right? Obviously showcase your therapist and any latest equipment and facility, but people come before equipment, right? So we love to show off our equipment that we might have in the clinic or the latest gizmo that we've got. That's fine, but you should show your therapist how they're using that with other patients, which is the priority. Okay, also we want to be able to create value in what we're sending to people, so they want to be receiving it on a consistent basis. And so the key here is to really, educate to be the expert. You're going to educate past patients on different conditions. And so the key here is to really stay top of mind with past patients as the expert to turn to first if something comes up. So how many times have you been in a clinic when you're, helping someone with their neck and someone else is working on another person's back, and the person's like, oh, I didn't realize you treated backs. We sure do, right? Oh, my husband has a back problem. Let me, have him come in and take a look, right? So people may have come to you for one thing, but then developed another thing or injured a different way, and now they're reading something about, knees when they didn't have a knee problem before, but now they do. And guess what? Now there's this opportunity where they think, oh, I'll give them a call again, and now you got a past patient returning. Also in creating value here, providing useful content. So health tips that will be shared. So many people I've heard of that have direct mail newsletters, especially the kind of older generation will actually keep those. If they have like a recipe in them, for example, they might keep it around, right? So that's the marketing materials that have a long shelf life. And those health tips and those things might be shared with neighbors or friends and family, right? Also, non-relevant content such as recipes, contests, exercises can be really fun to put in there. And patients, again, will hold on to these printed pieces for a while if you're doing those kind of things. Lastly, here we want to definitely call them to action. So you need to be promoting your friend, family referral programs in here. Definitely workshop events you might be holding, community events you might be holding, and then offers to come back in, right? So, giving them the gift of health, for example, getting them to come back in is key there. All right, so step 3 here, we put a lot of effort into putting that newsletter together so that it's really going to speak to our audience, and we've really dialed in what we want to say to our past patients. But now we got to make sure it actually gets in front of people, right? That's the key. You can put something great together, but if it doesn't connect with the people, then it's not going to do anything. So we want to make sure that we're hitting lots of different channels. So these different things here are called channels. We've got direct mail as a channel. We've got in-person handouts as a channel. We've got email as a channel. We've got social media as a channel, right? And so it's really critical that you just don't do one thing here to try and save costs, right? Which is really hurting you and limiting your revenue generating capabilities down the road. So really important that we focus on these different areas. So in digital, one thing that we do here is we're definitely sending out the digital monthly patient newsletter, and that's going to go up on the website. It's going to help them with SEO on the website, the way that we have newsletters constructed now and embedded into the website. Google should pick up on these words that are in the website, and that does help with SEO. Also email, right? That newsletter is going out via email, making sure that we have good open rates above like 20% is good. And then people are going to obviously connect from here, read it. They might actually book an appointment right from that email too. There's lots of different actions that we're doing with that. There we go. But here's the key thing, right? We want to be using digital for sure. Email, social media posts, all those good things. Getting it out there digitally is key. But think about, I saw a great meme a while back, and it was hilarious because I grew up with this, right? Which was, when you first started email, maybe for me that was like back in the late 90s, having email, and it's like you get an email and you're so excited, right? Because you got your first email, and then you were inundated with direct mail, right? In your mailbox. Think about Publishers Clearinghouse and all these catalogs and stuff. We still get all that today, right? Still get all these catalogs and everything in the mail today. But what about email today, right? And so then the excitement was like, hey, I'm so excited to get this email. And then fast forward to today's world, and the cartoon was shown, this enormous list of emails, and you're like not too happy about having to go through all this list of emails, but you got this piece of direct mail and you're excited for it, right? So it's kind of this flip. So in a digital world, direct mail is still king actually of return on investment. So yes, you got to pay for printing, you got to pay for postage, but it's an investment because it's actually going to generate you a lot more return on your investment. And why? Because it actually gets read. Print materials have a different neurological effect than a screen-based piece of marketing. And the Canadian Post actually did a great study on this. They had EEGs on people's heads, and the interaction of people on digital media versus print materials was substantially different, right, neurologically. And people are much more apt to actually take action from a printed material versus a digital piece. So that's really critical. So, let's look here at if you're just sending your newsletter digitally versus direct mail. We actually have some case studies here from clients. So if we look at clinic one here, both of these clinics had about 2,000 people on their customer list, right? So if we look at the blue, that's the clinic that just sent digital newsletters only, right? Out via email, social, that kind of stuff. And then clinic two in the red is the clinic that sent both digitally and also printed and direct mailed their newsletter. So same volume of people that they're mailing to, but let's look here. You can see month after month, there was substantially more returning patients in those months for the clinic that direct mailed their newsletters. In fact, look here at something like July, right? The clinic that only sent out digital newsletters had 13. The clinic that sent direct mail had 51. So huge. That's almost 40 different, past patients returning difference, right? So put 40 into a case of the value of each clinic, each patient being $1,000. That's $40,000 revenue that could be generated, right? So you can see the difference here. Yes, you're going to pay money, right, to send out printed materials, direct mail, postage, but the return on investment is big. So what does that impact look like over the course of a year? Well, the clinic that just sent out digital newsletters, 306 new patients, 550 new patients for the clinic that did printed newsletters. And look at their difference in reactivated past patients, right? So not only are you getting past patients come back in, but it's a whole effect, right, out there in the community that printed material can be handed out to current patients. They'll go back and give it to a spouse or friend or family member. Sometimes people will put these in a doctor's office waiting room, right, that people would take. So there's lots of capabilities that you can do with printed material as well as digital, right? But the key thing here is that clinics that use digital means and also invest in direct mailing marketing materials, especially their newsletter, get better results. So here's some examples of clinics that sent out and the type of patients increase that they've seen. These are generally over about anywhere from like 2 to 4 months of reactivation patients from those examples. But when you think about it, when you're sending out, say, like 2,000 direct mail newsletters, it's only going to cost you about 67 cents a piece, right? So it's really not that much of a cost when you can generate so much more ROI. And typically what we like to see is anywhere from 0.5% to 1% conversion. But that basically means is that for every, let's say, 1,000 newsletters that you send out, we'd like to see about 10 reactivated patients come in for that. So again, if you think 10 times $1,000 value each patient, $10,000. Now, if it costs me, say, $1,000 to send out that newsletter, would I spend $1,000 to generate $10,000? Of course, right? So again, you have to look at what is the return on investment that I want to generate from these marketing actions, and just make sure that you're getting that kind of ROI back that you expect. All right, so just to recap here, the 3 steps to maximize your patient newsletter results is, again, focusing on your audience, right? Who's the audience that I want to target with my newsletter? and the content that I'm going to put into that. So that's where making it personalized, putting the effort into getting the photos in the clinic, the stories in the clinic. That's what's going to make it convert a lot better. And then delivering it, right? Making sure that I am investing in sending out my newsletter across lots of different channels, both in digital, in-person handouts, and also direct mail. Now, also when you're looking at past patients as well as current patients, you want to be looking at different marketing tools that can help your current patients spread the word of mouth, right? So if you think of your patients that have come in, they're telling you, hey, you've changed my life. I love what you've done for me. I'm so excited, right? You have all these wonderful things that you hear in the clinic. Right there and then, that patient becomes part of your marketing team, right? And if you think that way, you can have thousands of people being on your marketing team if you give them the tools that's going to help them spread the word of mouth, right? So we do that both digitally as well as in handout materials. Again, there's going to be a very different experience when someone's looking at a brochure or something from your clinic. As far as a friend or family member, guess what? They're probably going to go start to check out your website and then start to do some different actions, and ideally take action towards becoming a new patient. So some things that you definitely want to make sure that you have different things for in your clinic is practice brochures. These are, kind of a no-brainer that every practice should have lots of different practice brochures about their programs. If you have specialty things like women's health or knee program or ACL rehab program, whatever it may be, you need to have a specific brochure about that to market it, right? And that's going to help the word get out better. You can do all kinds of things with brochures, but especially make sure that your patients are taking them all the time, right? You can also give them the doctors, offices, whatever it may be. Direct mail postcards, right? These are a real key supplement to your patient newsletter. So in the ideal world, what you should be doing is your patient newsletter should be going out every single month, digital and direct mail. And then you should supplement that with direct mail postcards that are seasonal, that maybe you're highlighting an event, whatever it may be. But ideally, you would have your newsletter hit, and then 2 weeks later, you'd have your postcard hit. And you keep that rhythm up, that's going to drive a lot of people back in. Now, what's cool is the newsletter, again, you're telling that stories, you're keeping that emotional connection, but the postcards can be a little bit more salesy, right? Getting people to take action. So like here, get up, get here, get better, right? It's more direct, and you can do that with a postcard. You can have some of that language in your newsletter, but your newsletter is a little bit more of a PR action, right? Postcards can really hit home when you're kind of keeping that emotional connection, but then your postcards are doing their job of selling. Now, if you just do postcards, that's okay, right? You're going to get results, but not like if you're doing both together. The other thing you want to be also having in your clinic are patient rack cards. These are really easy to take away with patients, right? And if, that example of you're working on someone and they go, oh gosh, I didn't know you worked on backs. Sure do. Here's a rack card. Your friend, your neighbor has it. Give this to them, right? That's all those kind of scenarios that happen in the clinic all the time. But again, you need the ammunition here for them to take that. So if you have patient rec cards on different conditions, different things that you commonly treat, people are going to take them. And what's great is to make sure in your waiting room that you have like a wall rack of these, right? And then the people will take them on their own. Boom, there you go. Free marketing there, basically. Here's a cool thing that we've developed over time, and that's review generation rec cards. So we want to make it as easy as possible for people to leave Google reviews, right, or Facebook reviews. And in today's world, hey, since COVID, QR codes become really popular. So a great way to just ask nicely for reviews is in the clinic. Hey, here's a rack card. Would you, here's information, like just scan this and you'll be able to go, leave your review right for us. So again, it's a nice way of asking, and it's very successful with our clients. The other thing in today's world is that, hey, people are have to pay more out of pocket than ever before, right? Deductibles, you name it. So there's a lot of financial considerations going into investing in coming to therapy for the full plan of care, right? And you need to do a very good job at the beginning and the whole way through the plan of care of selling this person why they need to keep coming, right? Why are you helping them? Even though that maybe their pain has gone, we know that that pain can come back if they're not properly strengthened or coordinated in their joints and muscles, right? So a new patient welcome packet is really a great way to showcase to a client from the get-go and get that mindset of I need to invest in my health, right? And you can have information about your therapist in there, your key programs. It's a great tool for every patient to take home with them, as well as you can give that out in the clinic. I'm sorry, like to physicians' offices and whatever else, maybe community events and things like that. But it's really a great selling type packet. And guess what? When that person, that patient comes in, they've had a great first visit with you. They're confident. Like, I feel like these, this therapist is really going to help me. They have to go home and have a financial conversation with their spouse or significant other. And that's when the money part comes in. Is this really worth it? They should, they're probably going to explore your website. But if they have some nice materials in front of them like this, there's more confidence that this is the right choice for them financially. So in summary here, again, we want to tie this all into this patient acquisition strategy. Not only are we working hard to get new patients in the door, but we should be working really hard to get our past patients back for care, right? And sending friends and family. So I hope this was very helpful for you today in how to look at getting more past patients back in, definitely using your patient newsletter. So I'll open up here for the chat. You just find that chat button there. If you have questions, be happy to answer those at this time. So again, I hope this was helpful to you. Thank you so much for taking your time to be on with me today. And go ahead and work hard at getting those past patients back in and growing your practice. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.